is prophylaxis? So prophylaxis in simple words is paying attention to your opponent's ideas. So chess is of course a game where we have to make the moves, we have to make the plans, we have to act, not just based on what we want to, but those things change. Our decisions can change based on what our opponent is also trying to do. Because we cannot be like, okay, I have a plan, I'll just play that, whatever my opponent does. No, it doesn't work that way. When we make a move, our opponent also is going to make a move. We are going to have a plan, our opponent is also going to have a plan. So we have to take into account what opponent wants to do. And then accordingly, we have to adjust and then make the moves. So because if you're ignoring your opponent's ideas, then you're ignoring half of the game because when you are going to make a move, your opponent is going to make the move as well. They are going to play their plan as well. So it's extremely important that along with your own plans, along with your own ideas, you should also keep in mind about your opponent's ideas. So what you can do is you can adjust to that. Maybe you can deal with that ideas first and then go for your own ideas. So that's extremely important. So let's start with the positions here. So this is a very interesting endgame. It is white to play. Now, what is what are the things which we can notice about this position? So one thing is that material is equal. White has the queen side pawn majority, two pawns versus one pawn of black. Black has king side pawn majority, three pawns versus two pawns of white. White has the knight, black has the bishop, etc. So in this position, based on what I see, I feel that white is slightly better. The question is why? One of the things we should notice, which I noticed, is that these pawns and this pawn, all four pawns, especially these three pawns, are on the same color as the bishop. So what's the problem with it? See, bishop, light squares, these three pawn, light squares, this pawn also light square. So then there are two problems because of which there are two problems that happen because of that. Number one, the bishop's activity gets restricted. That's one problem. What's the other problem? The problem is that as I had discussed in one of my earlier videos, when the pawns are on the same color of squares, they also control the same color of square. So let's say when the pawn is on light square, though it goes forward on the dark square, but right now it's controlling the light square. It is not controlling the a5 square, it is controlling the b5 square. So because of that, the dark squares of black gets weaker. So okay, so that's why I feel that white has good chances. Now, what should we try to do? So of course, we know that in endgame, if possible, we should try to activate our king. We should try to create a pass pawn. Yeah. Now, so how about our opponent's ideas? We should also think about our opponent's ideas. So, as I told you, one of the big weaknesses in black's position is these three pawns. They are all on the light squares. So, black might want to change that. There is also another reason. If we want to activate our king, there is a very clear way with which you can activate our king and attack on the side where black has the pawn majority. So both of these, not keeping the pawns on light squares and dealing with the king activity, it becomes clear that black wants to play g5. So what g5 will do? G5 will, in fact, cover f4 square and h4 square from the king, and that will make it difficult for white to make progress. So we want to activate our king, but we just don't want to activate it here. We want to go further. We want to attack the weaknesses. And for that to happen, it's important that we don't allow our opponent's idea to restrict our king. So now with this discussion, the move should be clear. It is h4. So by playing h4, what we can do is we stop our opponent's idea of g5, and then we can go king g3 and king f4. Now there might be an idea that what if king g3? And then we can play g5. Now, so black can play g5. Now we can play h4 and then maybe pawn exchange, and then we can do something. But one of the important principles which you must remember is that if you are pushing for the win, you don't want to exchange more number of pawns than necessary because each and every pawn for you is important and that can be promoted in future. So the more pawns you exchange, the higher the chances you give your opponent to make a comeback. So that's why you should not play h4 and say, okay, I'll exchange the pawns. No, do not allow exchange of pawns by allowing them to play g5. Go h4, don't allow g5. Now, let's look at some variations. So black will play king e7, activating their king. Now we activate our king as well. King f6. G5 is coming, so we have to deal with it. King f4. Not only we brought the king on f4, but stop black's idea of g5. Now, as you can see, black has the pawn majority, 3 versus 2 on the king side, but they are not able to push any of these pawns. They are not able to create a pass pawn because of our active king, because of that h4 pawn. So, and black's king is also not able to get a hit because of the king and the pawns. So now, this king is sort of stuck in this position because if it moves, then we get the king to g5, and that will create more problems. So black will just play bishop b4, moving the bishop. Now, what can we do? See, we have the pawn majority on the queen side, two pawns versus one pawn. Black cannot push their pawn majority, but we can. So we are going to play b4 in this position. Why? It is a very simple plan. Time to play a4, then b5, create a pass pawn, and then let's just make some moves. I'll just give you an example. So bishop c6, black just waits. We play a4. Black just waits. So in this position, we capture. Black just waits. Not a problem. We can play this. Black just waits. Just showing an example of black waits, what can we do? See, what did we do? We created a pass pawn. Now we want to push it, so we brought the knight. And then let's say black waits, and then we do this. And yeah, win the bishop and the game. So this is just to show you if black just waits, then what can we do? Now, let's say if after this, after b4, what if black doesn't wait and brings the king to e6? Not a problem. King g5 attacking this pawn. Black has to defend this pawn. King f7, now a4. Let's continue with our idea on the queen side. Like I showed you in the earlier variation, we can create a pass pawn and we'll be able to win black's bishop. So the important thing here was recognizing that black wants to play g5 to restrict our king, to not allow the king activity. So we should play h4 first, restrict that, stop black from playing g5, and then we can activate our king, and we are getting the winning position. Right, now let's go for the next position. All right, so let's go ahead with this position. It is white to play. By the way, just to clear the confusion, the pawns are not going on this side, the pawns are going on this side. So the pawn is on c4 for black. So it will go like this to promote. It will go like this because sometimes when less pieces are there, such confusion can happen. I'm just clarifying it. This is the game, by the way, between uh, Carlsen versus Nakamura. Mm, so quite an interesting game. White was Carlsen, black was Nakamura. So this game was played in the chess.com Speed Chess Championship a bit back in the final. And they played lots of games actually. There were blitz games, then bullet games, and then eventually Carlsen managed to win in a very close match. So, and this was one of them from one of the games. So, Carlsen had white pieces here. Uh, so, Carlsen has the knight for two pawns, but but it is Carlsen who is trying to defend because look at these pawns. So, especially the c4 pawn, just trying to promote, and the king is actually also cut off. So, king cannot come here and just stop it. So, Carlsen's knight is also far on b8. So, uh, we have to find a way to deal with. So here the threat is clear. See, that is absolutely clear. That is c3, c2, c1. Now we have to find a proper way to deal with it. In fact, Carlsen, since it was an online game and he didn't have enough time, he didn't find the correct resource, and then he went on to lose the game. So we have to find the resource. So what should we do in this position? See, first of all, what I would do in this position is that I would look at some direct ways in which I can stop that pass pawn. So what would that be, for example? So it would be, can I bring my king? But okay, we have already said that the king is cut off. So I mean, I'm just trying to eliminate the possibility. So the king can't do much when king is cut off. So that doesn't help. I'll look for the knight. Okay, knight has four moves. All of them are just, sorry, knight has three moves. All of them just, yeah, the knight is lost. That's not what you want. So I have to try to do something with the rook. So what do I do? I can't go rook c8. I mean, I can play this, but if he takes the knight, I can't even do that, so that doesn't work. So now what should I try to do? I should try to find a way with which I can stop the pawn. And then once I start considering the rook moves, this move comes into my mind, that is rook at 6. So what does rook at 6 do? The c6 square, by the way, is covered by the knight. That's what we want. We want the rook to stop the passed one. So now, but someone can say that, okay, in this position, can I not play something like rook h4 and then try to take it? So no, that won't work because black can play b5 and then this is trouble. So that's not what, because b5 this pawn is defended, the knight is being attacked. That's a problem. And you also have to calculate after rook h4 this. Since the king is cut off, will he be able to make progress? You have to see those things. So maybe it's an interesting move. You can keep it in mind, but that's not the first move which should come into mind. What else can you do? If you can try to so another interesting move is rook at 6. You try to go here. And another thing in this position is that this allows your knight to get out as well. So how does that help you? So for example, so in this position, if you play rook at 6, then in this position now c3 is played. So this pawn push is being hacked. So you can play rook c6. And then now the knight is defending this, and because of that, we can try and stop this pawn. Now, so for example, let's discuss. So I was discussing something about rook h4. So that's not that great move because, as I said, there are two problems with it. Number one, b5 defending the pawn. Knight is trapped, and black is like, okay, I'll take the knight. I have two pawns. Well, then I'll slowly push. Creates another problem for us. That's not what we want. So yeah. So basically, then if rook h4 doesn't work in this position, then this rook h6 is an interesting move. So uh, as I said, the plan is to play rook c6. By the way, Carlsen played king e6 in this position, and then c3, knight d7, c2, and he resigned here because there is no way to stop that. C2. Now let's come back to rook h6. By the way, now if black takes the knight, then what? So here is the important thing. We are not only trying to stop the c4 pawn. We have to be careful about that b6 pawn as well. Capture the b6 pawn. Then we play rook b4, and then we'll be able to win that c4 pawn without much difficulty. Now, let's say in this position, if c3 is played and rook c6, not a problem. Now, black takes the knight, so we could take this pawn. There is no rush, but there is no rush. Let's take this pawn with a check. Black plays king a7, we go rook c6, and then we'll soon win the pawn because if rook here and then here, rook here and here, in the pawn. So after rook b6 check, say for example, he plays something like king c7. He's like, I don't want to allow rook c6 check. Not a problem. Time to play rook b4 or something like that. Rook c4 is coming, and then we'll be able to get this one. Of course, rook d3 doesn't work as usual, which we saw in the last line. This, something like this, and we win the c3. So similarly, in this position, there was this possibility of rook h4, and there was this possibility of rook h6 to stop that pawn. We chose rook h6 because not only it tries to stop the pawn, but somewhere it also allows the knight to get out. How? So because if rook h6, then in this position if b5, since the rook is on h6, that gives us the possibility to play knight c6. Now it's c3, then we can play knight b4 to stop this pawn. And yeah, this is how white can survive. White survives in this position. Alright, so similarly, like the last position, two phases. One, recognizing the opponent's idea. Second, making the list of the moves which stops it. So proper moves were rook h6 and rook h4. We compared, calculated both of them, and then we made the decision to play 6. So this concludes our discussion of the topic of prophylaxis. I hope that you got um, much more idea about the importance of considering your opponent's ideas and what method and the thought process you can apply to not only identify your opponent's ideas, but after identifying the thought process to make the list of candidate moves, compare, and then make the decision and yeah, deal with the opponent's threat in such a way that you Don't allow some other serious ideas.